Uh, okay, cool. That's fantastic. So I'm just going to quickly repeat myself. For anyone meeting you for the first time, how would you describe what a technical artist actually does?
Well, if I'm feeling poetic, I'll say, um, we're taking bits of mathematics and logic and turning them into beautiful pieces of art. If I'm up late debugging a bunch of problems, I'll say that we are, Python wrangling, a nested set of wires and constructing a pipeline as much as we can. But really, what a tech artist is you're halfway kind of into the programmer camp and you're halfway kind of into the art camp. You are a vital um, you are a vital part of that team. You're a vital support arm for the artist. You're there on behalf of that art team to build them tools, to build them shaders and master materials, to build them procedural solutions, uh, you know, or rigs. There's a whole spectrum of different types of tech artists. Pipeline TDs, technical animators, environment focused or effects focused technical artists. So really, you're there for the artist. You're kind of an artist's best friend.
So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. You get to do a bit of art, you
Yeah,
get to do a
I
bit of
think so.
coding. So okay, that's fantastic. Before I continue, I just want to let everybody know, guys, if you have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. We'll make sure we can answer as many as we possibly can. And please don't feel shy. This is just my personal opinion, but I think there is no such thing as a silly question. We are all here to learn. We are all here to explore. So ask as many questions as you want. This is coming from a former student and someone who has been sort of in a similar place as you guys. So I highly encourage everyone to ask questions. If you guys have any thoughts, feel free to share them in the chat. Okay, moving on. Next question. Harvey, you've been in both indie and large scale production environments. What originally pulled you to like the quote unquote tech art side of things?
Well, when you're in indie, a lot of times you just have to do everything yourself. So um, I mean, I come from an environment art background, and so early on, I worked at some VR houses, and um, people started to notice that, hey, you're doing a lot of very technical things. Kind of when you have to build an entire environment for VR that's supposed to look fairly. We're doing a lot of VR commercials and contexts like that, where it needs to look good, it needs to look realistic. But that's a hard performance constraint on top of having to build all that. Well, you better know some trips and tips to kind of get through there. So very quickly on, I was kind of tapped on the shoulder. So, maybe we'll have you kind of focus on some of this, technical art support. And I just honestly, it's kind of crazy because I'll give you, and this is kind of a presser, I'll say, because I think especially with like tech art, if you're like have a big artist mind and you come from a like kind of an art background, it could be somewhat intimidating, and especially it can be intimidating as like the math or the programmer or so on. I can give you like a little bit of context where I failed engineering mathematics like 3 times in a row in college. I failed you know every intro to programming class, and the reason why is because to it just that's the way that's programming and math is typically taught is doesn't really speak to the soul. It's oh wow, I get to fill an array for my inventory. But what we get to do is we get to use math to make something beautiful, and we get to kind of see that where our output log, isn't like a terminal. It really is just the pixels on the screen. And that's something with our demos. I kind of want to walk you guys through a little bit so you guys can kind of feel that.
Now, that's fantastic though, first of all, that it's like such a great mix. Now for people who might be somewhat on the same page as me, I'm not afraid of admitting this. I am not very good at math. My math skills are not very amazing. So what would you say to people who are not necessarily the best at math, but who want to explore technical art, but are a bit hesitant because they're like, oh, there's math involved in the whole process.
Yes. We have a pandemic of innumeracy, and it's not great. Um, so I kind of this boot camp is kind of geared as assuming you have very little foundation. So it is really, we're trying to teach a data driven approach to building things that's a little bit software agnostic, where you spend a lot of focus on toolkits like Houdini, but a lot of the uh, things that we kind of show here can be kind of taken and done in Unreal PCG context, can be done in like a shader writing context, because there's certain conceptual concepts. What I kind of wanted is to have like a when I'm making this course, to have a little bit of a Mr. Miyagi, like wax on, where it's, hey, it's a math course in disguise. Where, for example, we learn early on about transforms, and we learn early on about simple things you can do in a material editor with nodes. It's very friendly to kind of distort or warp or play with flow maps on textures that can be useful for effects or environment art or various other things. But what we're really teaching there also is addition and multiplication, because you can think of adding math. There's like two kinds of like learning when it comes to math. There's like the deep why, knowing the proof and working through it. And that's like what a math class is for. Okay. What we want is tools. We're artists. We want a new brush. We want to have, oh, that's a smooth step function. That does what for me? Multiplication. I can think of that as scale or tiling. Addition, I can think of that as offsets or panning. That so the idea is to build you up a uh, a familiarity where these and we kind of build up from there to vector operations like dot products, and eventually by the end of the course, you'll start to have some pretty high level concepts around linear algebra and some calculus. But really, it's always in the context of, what does this do for me artistically? What does that get me? And how am I using that? And you could always treat some of these things as a little bit of a black box, where you put something into it and you get something out of it. And then we can kind of dive when you're a little bit more mature later on in the course, and get a fuller understanding of it. So we kind of take into account that most people are not math people. And I wasn't a math person until I really started doing this for a job, and I realized, wow, actually, uh, I'm always reminded of, like, there's this scene in the Lord of the Rings when uh, Bilbo or shows Gandalf the ring for a second, and he goes, there's like a montage of him going off and reading all these books and all this. But in the real world, those like books of spells and tomes that unlock the secrets are called textbooks. They're principally math books. Really, you'll get to a point, especially I kind of make it an intrinsic part of this learning, because a lot of tech artists will kind of bumble their way through it as a junior, and then they'll get to a point where they're at mid level, and they're kind of having a hard time progressing, because they don't have that foundation, and they don't have the mathematical knowledge to kind of, they're just playing around the nodes and hoping something works out. Whereas I want to give you kind of the tools in a structured and, like, not super hardcore a way that you can know what you're doing.
So I guess one way of putting this would be like, while at a surface level, like math being involved may seem like slightly intimidating, but this is more of like math that's designed to help you artistically, and math that will be a whole lot more fun because you're doing it from an artistic perspective and you are already interested in
Mhm.
that side of things. And I want to add this just from my end. That as a former Vertex student, someone who is now into environment art and prop art, I want to say one thing to you guys listening in, that the study experience, the learning experience at Vertex is amazing. I can understand that I may sound a bit biased because I'm a student myself, but I'm just going to put it this way, that I have spent my own hard-earned money in this whole course. So obviously, if there were any issues, I would be the first one to flag it out, to mention that, hey, there are problems here. But I will be very honest, this is completely unfiltered. The experience at Vertex is amazing because I I'm someone who is not a quick learner. There are times I take, my own sweet time to learn things. I'm not very fast. And I have asked my mentors the most basic and simplest of questions, and they have taken the time to respond to me. Sometimes I would get responses in like almost the same day. And I just want to highlight that the support that you get during the course is genuinely amazing. Not only support from your mentors, but support from your peers. I have had the fortune of studying alongside some extremely talented individuals who are all now working in AAA. Like they're all, one of my classmates, he is working in a AAA games company. So I'm I just want to say that like the support is genuinely unreal. I was amazed at the kind of support I received, and it, just to drive my point home, I don't have a background in games. I don't have a background in game art. I did my um degree in journalism. So from it, like I've switched industries. So it has truly been amazing. And now I'm able to do freelance work, and I'm able to create props, create environments. It's truly amazing. Moving on, Harvey, what's one project or maybe a workflow or maybe a tool that is really exciting at the present moment?
I think so. This is a kind of two-parter. So I'm a big Houdini shill. Okay. I you know I would say like really that's where you really should be investing your time as far as like a DCC. You know, just there's no competition as far as like the things that you can do and really the kind of platforming. It's really it's not even a modeling software, and it really is like an integrated environment for 3D. It gives you so much more flexibility and control, and especially in the context of like something really hot right now is machine learning. So I think there might be a couple immediate like boo boo machine learning, and I think most people's interaction with that technology is kind of in these not very good applications and these kind of chatbots, things like that. Really, all ML comes down to is flipping like a programming, the software paradigm, which the software paradigm is that you make some program or algorithm or function that takes some set of inputs and turns into some set of outputs. Oh, at the end of the day, that's what an application is. A game is the same way. I'm typing in, I'm moving my mouse, that's an input. My character moving around, that's an output. Okay, but this is also very discreetly at any like kind of function, anything that you might want to do, any kind of small tool. The machine learning kind of is the idea that sometimes it's hard or it's like difficult to make a perfect function, or like some of them are kind of just hard to know where to even start, but you can get a lot of examples, or you can generate a lot of examples of the input that you will expect to give it and the output that you expect to get. And through a lot of wicked math that's super fun that we don't have time to go over today, it can kind of figure out, it can what that function is. So it's kind of like flipped around. So instead of you being the super smart programmer, you just generate a load of synthetic data and then have that turn into something. Let me ground this out in some examples. So a really great tech artist, Ryan Smith, who's I think he's the lead of the technical development tech art at Gearbox, known for Borderlands. He had a really great post about how he used a style transfer technique where they make games that are very in this really specific graffiti art style, and they have a really great asset organization. So like when their artists are, let's say they have a character and they bake that in Painter, um, they save all these layers and they save the different layers in the base color. So, there's definitely things, shader wise, like edge detections and things like that. But it's also an artist hand layer typically in their workflow where they're hand drawing like the different graffiti marks that are going to be on their face and so on. But they have that just as like a black and white, they have stored, and they have that for all their games. Okay, so that's a huge amount of textures. That's thousands and thousands of textures. That's a huge amount of outputs. an input might be something that just we can have some relationship to. Really, the idea is that with machine learning is that you're trying to tie two sets. If there's two things, we can kind of tie a relationship, some function between them. In this case, he trained the normal maps of all these models against like those graffiti sketches. So now they have, as part of their baker, once they bake a model, immediately it gives them kind of that a first pass that they can kind of play around. They can do reseed and they can kind of get different ideas about how they want to go with that texturing process. And it just helps the artist. It's an artist friendly kind of tool. We have a little
Um,
question here.
yeah.
Question about how to present yourself as a junior tech artist. A tech artist is usually not considered an entry level position, right? My impression is that you need an in depth knowledge of an engine, for example. This typically comes from years of working on projects. As someone with lots of experience in 2D art and design on small projects and who has learned proper programming over the past few years, what would be a good way to present myself to studios if I lack big studio experience? It seems like there's no such thing as a junior tech artist. So I'm wondering how to position this to a broad mix of skills. So great question. So I'll tell you how it used to be and how kind of it is now. Like I was kind of, I think, the last generation. It used to be what you're saying used to be kind of true. Let's say we went back in time 8 years ago, maybe 8 to 12 years ago. It was much more common that tech artists transitioned after they were usually like a mid-level artist of some other discipline, animation, environment art, and so on. But the demand for tech art has increased so much, just because of how much more scope and scale our worlds we're creating, how much more procedural we're approaching problems that many schools, not just the Vertex School, but also many traditional schools, like my alma mater, Texas A&M, or Noman, focus on tech art. So you kind of there has been, like, for the last couple of years, a generation of junior tech artists. What I can say is a couple things. One, as far as like how to like present yourself and go for it, is the thing I kind of see that I think you're missing there a little bit is like just art side of things. So you seem to like you have a little bit of ground on the program stuff, and you might have some 2D art. Now it depends on what you mean by that. Maybe it's pixel art, maybe it's compositing. At the very least, you might know some art fundamentals about composition, if it's like something like concept art. But really, you need to have like a really deep. It's valuable. It's useful to have like a big understanding of the basic high-low workflow, right? Like that's really important. In a sense, the truth is, yeah, you kind of have to know a lot of things, okay? And truthfully, you can usually, especially when you're a junior, get away with knowing more about the art things than the tech things, because there's so many small problems that are don't have a high technical debt that you're oftentimes they would put some like an associate tech artist. You might not. By the way, also you may not come across tech artist, like junior tech artist, like roles. That's like another thing that you've been searching for. And it's just because a lot of companies have like weird ways that they kind of name these. Some of them are called associate tech artists. Some of them are called tech artists. Or some companies, like larger companies, for example, won't even do a grading system. They just keep that internal. So I'm a tech artist at Meta. The last place I worked, I was called a senior tech artist. Internally, I'm a level 3, which means I'm like a senior just before like what you would be a lead. But like we just have that role. So like the JD, again, there's like it's one of those things that like becomes once you're it's way easier and way more clear, I think, especially once you've been on the other side of it and you've hired people. It's not they're not this isn't America's Got Talent, like they're looking for somebody, okay? And if you can fulfill the requirements of their job description, they're going to want to hire you. Okay, it's as simple as that. And there's a way to like you can parse and read those, and a lot of that information, especially the bulleted kind of stuff, is what super matters. But oftentimes there's parts there that are negotiable. They might say you need certain X years of experience or certain X number of titles. At the end of the day, there's a market and there's a competition, and they only have so much time. They're going to if you have the skills and you can sell yourself, that can be good enough. Okay, for a junior tech artist portfolio, would you only add tech art related things, shader, tools, scripting, procedural generation, or also add traditional 3D props environments? Um, that's a great question. Okay, so I think this is actually, maybe we might be going a little bit out of order. This might be a good opportunity to kind of showcase some of the student works and maybe showcase some good examples of a tech art portfolio. So when it comes to portfolio building, I can we have it a little bit tough because if you were an environment artist or you were a character artist, you just have to make a really pretty environment or a really pretty character, right? Um, that's we have to do that or demonstrate that, but also like, because they want to make sure that you know your stuff, that you are an artist, that you have that artistic eye and that vision, but also you need to be doing something interesting, something like technically interesting as well. There's definitely some areas where, like, you can kind of get away, especially let's say you're doing some kind of generation. You can, more than like environment arts, you could get away with using like mega scans or like kit bashed assets for certain parts of your scenes if it's not crucial or critical, just because you're not an environment artist, right? Let me go ahead and give you guys a couple examples. Let me share my screen. Okay, this is I would say like a slam dunk, great example of a portfolio. And actually, I'll go ahead and drop this one into y'all's chat right here for you guys to kind of look at. This is actually going to be y'all's primary instructor. So this is Hisham's portfolio. He is one of the instructors. We're co-teaching this course together. So I made all the course material, and Hisham is probably one of the people I trust more than most tech artists I know to be able to teach it. To give you like some background, so Hisham was my first student. I've been working, I think, at Vertex, I think, around 18 months, getting close to 2 years now. But 2 years or so before that, maybe 2.5 years before that, I just ran a private mentorship. And my first student ever was Hisham when he was still at Howest, finishing up his degree in technical art. And he just is a go-getter. He's smart and he's driven, and so much so that I hired him when I was working at Mob Entertainment, working on the Poppy Playtime series, and I was the lead tech artist there. I brought him on. He was one of my first, right out of the door hires, and we worked with each other for a year and a half on that project. As well as very small little personal projects here and there. He has a really great, I think, example of like what is like, I think, a really great junior or associate, or like he's it's been a couple years now, so it's pretty soon it's going to be appropriate for me to refer to him as a mid-level tech artist. But let me show you like a couple of these that I think is a really great example. This was one that I think is a really great example, just because it's really flashy, it's cool looking, and also this particular one got him an 80 notice by 80 level. He had an 80 level article written about him. So this is an HDA, a Houdini tool that takes a set of VSP brushes in Houdini, just some base boxes, and generates procedural houses and buildings kind of in the engine live. This is one of the really cool things about Houdini, is because you're not just making some pieces of art, you're always making basically a tool, what we call a digital asset. You're always making some the art is kind of a tool. Instead of making a chair, you're going to make a system that will generate a bunch of different types of chairs. In this case, procedural kind of Tudor style houses. And here's like him just running through his little node chain. Procedural generation, building generation is a really cool area of procedural art and procedural modeling. That's super great. And he also has, you can also don't think that, oh, it's procedural. Sometimes people, especially if you come from more of an art side, you get this idea that procedural just means like non-organic or non-curvy. It means like hard edges and things like that. But it's not true at all. Here's an example of this kind of watermelon kind of very stylized kind of type of world. But this is entirely like a procedurally generated scene. Here's kind of his work in progress kind of blockouts. But these are all kind of tools. I can set this to a higher resolution. and it kind of gives you an idea of how this kind of workflow kind of looks to a degree. If you have a modeling background, it's a lot of the same things are there, like poly extrusions and bevels and so on. But really, we're driving these kind of with an asset and a data, kind of structure from top to bottom. And at the end, we'll kind of skim down past this network, and this is kind of the HTA, which is kind of now just a tool that you can just change all these different settings, and you have a bunch of different variations. And the benefit to this, work stream wise, is that one, you can do scope, right? You can get a lot more variations. You can fill world, but also just art iterations. Ideally, the goal is that for any production is that you have an allotted time and you want to do as many iterations on the content in there as possible. So you could have something where we don't go a procedural method and we just do it by hand, and we maybe get one or two passes on that asset, and it gets to where it needs to be. But we invest a little time, we make a tool, and then the artist in the engine can kind of just play with that and kind of do very fast, rapid iteration, and make decisions. So that's one of the big benefits here is that you can and also non-artists like level designers can kind of do iteration in that same context. Um,
Um,
Similarly, let me show you guys some of the stuff that you will be able to kind of at the end of this. So it's an 18-week course. At the end of this, there's we have a capstone, and we have like about 4 weeks. We work on this capstone kind of portfolio project. The idea is like this is the type of project, this kind of portfolio piece is going to help you get a notice, help you get attract leads, art directors, and recruiters. So I kind of want to showcase some of like the some of the standout examples from some of the previous terms of this boot camp. This was a kind of a cool kind of Roman forest sanctuary. Afnan spent a lot of time here on the procedural generation of ivy and foliage for this. So this one I thought was one of the really cool ones. That was I think in the last I think it was in the spring term we had for this. So we also have this will be a portfolio project, but we always have you have like a breakdown because if you don't have kind of a breakdown, some of like what's cool, what the hard technical part of this, it kind of make it lost, and that's useful. It's very useful that you build a ability to communicate. Like you, as a tech artist, have to communicate to very different stakeholders that sometimes speak the entirely different language, left versus right brain kind of thing, engineers versus artists, and make them understand what matters to both parties and make sure everyone's directed all the way. That was a pretty great one. One from our recent cohort is this like really great one by Daniel. It's kind of Temple of Time kind of inspired cathedral piece, and what he wanted to focus on was procedural kind of modeling and kind of procedural destruction. So this whole scene is based upon this kind of procedural setup here. This is an engine where he can kind of move this volume around, and it rechanges wherever those destructions are. And he doesn't have to go back into Houdini. He can kind of just do that iteration in the scene to get the shot that he needs. And similarly, it's an HDA. It's live. He can change the number of roofs, the number of columns. All this is being driven.
I just want to quickly hop in and mention that folks, as you look at all of this really cool stuff, in case you notice there's a lag, it's just Zoom because it does do that sometimes. And second thing I do want to mention is we do have a few more questions coming in
Oh yes,
real
I see
quick.
something. Okay.
So
How
yeah.
many examples? Let me do some of these questions, and we'll get on to this. Is one that from Peter. That this is probably I think my favorite piece from the last cohort. It's based upon this shot from Sleeping Beauty. So I thought this was a really great piece. I'll go ahead and answer these questions while you guys kind of take that in. How many examples of tools or interesting projects do hiring tech artists expect from candidates? Would small teams that enhance tools that enhance a pipeline created for Blender or Unity be valuable? 100%. That's 100%. I'll have a okay. So the thing on that is like specialization is like kind of where you want to do early. You kind of want to get into like a specialize in a set of skills. Like truthfully, how you have to that because it can feel overwhelming that all the things that you kind of have to feel like you have to learn. It's like, oh my gosh, it feels like they're asking the world of me. But flip it the other way around. No, no, no. I have a problem. I have a deadline. I'm a manager. I'm trying to get everything pushed away. I just was able to fight back and forth with the suits to give me a little bit more budget to my team. I can bring someone on. I have a deficiency. I have a shader guy. He's super great. I have a Max script guy. I have a guy who's like up and down Houdini. I need a Python master. Okay, and that's what I'm looking for. That's what the JD was defined towards. A lot of times the roles that we're kind of wanting to fill are particular. Like we're picking up someone. We're always hiring in the context of what we currently have on our team, what we kind of see from you, and also what's out there in competition. But yeah, 100% like those, especially the types of tools, really Vlad, what you're talking about is something called a pipeline TD, and those are very valuable people. I that can be a little bit more challenging just to showcase because like pipeline tools are like oftentimes like Python really kind of programming type of scripts, but there's definitely ways that you can kind of showcase those things in a GitHub or I had a really great tech artist friend of mine named Daniel who I hired actually, who's like part of the pipeline TD. By the way, I'm gonna use that term sometimes. TD is just like what they call tech art in film or VFX. So like that's technical designer. We don't use that term in games just because the game designers are called designers, so we just call it tech artists. But yeah, those are great. Like especially Blender, that's great. How much of this course is focused on AAA concepts, best practices versus things that are still applicable to art, viz, film, automotive, and such? Well, I'll tell you what, it's really focused on ultimately like kind of the goal is like really the goal in a word is that and really kind of where you should put your bar if you're coming in, and that's why I would say to everybody is like kind of, especially if you're kind of student starting out, you need to set a really good expectation, and the expectation is go to ArtStation, you look at oh my gosh, look at all this really great art, you need to be able to make art that looks just as good or better. Okay, that's the expectation, that's the competition. Okay, that's just the kind of mindset. In some sense, you're competing with the greatest artists of all time because they have the benefit of standing on the shoulders of all the greats. But there's, as it turns out, artists are lazy. We know a lot of cool shortcuts, and we share that information. We have a great community that helps each other out. When it comes to like let's say you have maybe an interest in things like film, automotive, and art viz. Well, all these things are happening in a game engine. Okay, they're doing a lot of post production for things like especially automotive stuff, and something like Unreal Engine and ArcViz is happening on Unreal Engine. So these, if you're learning approaches that are going to be useful for making beautiful looking games, you're probably going to be useful for any other render you're going to do in that same software. What is the ideal computer hardware specification one would need for this course? Actually, we have on our website. We have a spec for the recommended machine spec. So I think we could actually maybe find that. Yes, you know exactly where that is on the website. Let's see.
It should be towards a bit more on the
Basically in like the
bottom of the
catalog.
page.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the page that talks about the course. While you're pulling that up, I do want to add one thing that, again, from personal experiences, a lot of the time from my personal experience, I've noticed is the course is designed a lot more for you to like really gain skills that are very malleable. So, for example, I had the fortune of working for a company that's not games, but they create 3D models and for luxury companies. So when you go to like shopping sites, like for example, if you go to like Fenty Beauty and you look at a lipstick and you can see the thing in 3D, those are the 3D models that company used to make. So my point here is that the skills you learn are just so malleable that even though you may not necessarily be in games, you're in a different industry that uses 3D or any knowledge based on what course you're choosing, it's going to help you, and you can kind of mold yourself into your choice of industry that uses those said specific skills.
I think okay, so I think where how you find it is if you go to the course syllabi for the game art and you have the email to you, it'll actually be included in that. Here's what I'll tell you, okay? Actually, if you have a potato, if you're concerned about like you have like a not very good computer, uh, don't worry. Everything we're gonna cover in this course is totally doable because like my workstation, I'm kind of transitioning to is like a super beast 50 80 and all the cool things, but the machine I had when I kind of made a lot of this content was kind of an old an older machine, so like I think it was like a 980 Ti or something. So like it's a lot of I know a lot about performance for and making scenes work. So I guess I put off buying that upgrade for a while. Because my work machine is just sent to me. So usually I'm only using the machine for portfolio stuff. Um, so actually a lot of the examples, every single week we'll have like recorded modules, and usually that's going to be like 3 or 4 hours of content, and included with that is going to be scene resources, Unreal files, Houdini files, Substance Designer files, and these are kind of set up to be runnable and usable on even more weaker hardware. One thing I wanted to make a point though, and this is something I will say a little bit, unlike some of the there is one, a little bit of a trade-off. So of the boot camp, the boot camp is not as long as our full courses. So it's a little bit more condensed. Okay, so with that condensedness, as far as like, because you might hear, oh, it's like 3 or 4 hours of tutorials, like um, it's it's kind of dense, and there's a little bit of a pace. So treat it like it's a university, right? Like hours, where like the traditional heuristic there is like for every like hour class, it's you multiply it by 3 or 4. So I would really expect to be doing like 12 hours of commitment on top of the lecture times, which is going to be 4 hours split across two days. So altogether like 16 hours of kind of commitment per week, and if you can manage that, I think you'll be in a good place. Um, okay, cool. Let's see. Let's do a couple more of these. So I've been doing a 3D artist general and indie game devs for 4 years. I do everything from props, level art, lighting, post process, C# animation, uh, design, VFX, shaders, and much more. I feel like I've hit a bit of a plateau, and I'm looking for a boost in my knowledge careers. Would this bootcamp be good for me? Um, you know, I mean, it depends on what you want. I mean, do you want to be a tech artist? Do you want to be a generalist? One thing, especially in the indie situation, um, is that like again, you don't really want to be a generalist. In a way, it's kind of cool because I can do all these things, but what you'll find out is like people who are senior, they can kind of do all those things too. They've probably dabbled with them here and there, but like when you see them in like their specialized craft, no, they can do things that no other artist, or like they're like in the top 1,000 of artists in the world that could do that. Like that's like where you want to do that. That's a skill, right? Anyone can be put on a task and make something work, but it's what people are paying top dollar for is people who have like skill sets that really took years to kind of build up. So like that specialization, I would say find an area in there. Let's say it could be like tech art related. It could be maybe you really like shaders or VFX, and like maybe make that an area where you're really going to dive in a lot of effort and energy. For me, it was a lot of shader writing and procedural generation techniques. Um, okay, what kind of programs would tech artists other than Houdini and Unreal? Also, will we have to pay for the program we need for boot camp? No. So as part of your tuition, you'll be given like a Houdini education license. So that part is kind of there. I think we touch substance designer for like a couple course periods, but I think that's a subscription you kind of will kind of cover on your own. Besides that, I don't think there's anything else that would be that would come up. But again, that's only for like a week or two, so week or maybe 2 or 3 weeks. So you could always do like a trial for that. So no, I don't think there's anything else. Now the other question I think you had there was what other programs should you be using or be interested in? Well, obviously you need to know and be, or at least be very familiar with the general tools that artists use. You know, the blenders, the Mayas, the ZBrushes, the Substance Painter, and Designer. Those are like the common toolkits. Like there are other ones that you can kind of get like that are particular to like certain pipelines, like Marvelous, Designer, and so on. And like maybe it's not as important for you to spend a lot of effort or time on. Like ZBrush maybe isn't as important for you to spend a lot of time on, but you need to know, be familiar with that, kind of know where artists are coming from, and be able to support building tools for those contexts if that's where you end up at a studio. Do you recommend Cantana and Nuke? So no, not really, unless you're more interested in like a like that's not, they don't really have applicability in games. So Katana is like a really interesting like painting. Well, it's like a look dev. Sorry, I'm mixing it with Mario in my head. But those are and Nuke is like a composite software. These are made by the Foundry. These are kind of for like vertical pipelines. These are for like movies and really movies and VFX. If you that's where you want, if you're interested, you want to be what we call a TD, a technical designer, which is like the same kind of thing, but you work on movies, you make on animations, and yeah, 100% those are important tools. But we're really focused on like kind of games in this boot camp. Okay, I kind of want to finish up these examples right here before we kind of go on. This was a really great piece. I like how cool and kind of stylized it came out. I think it really captured the essence of this pretty well. And these are all HDAs where the user can describe a curve and kind of build these kind of cliffs out, and then the foliage kind of gets instanced across by procedural content graph and a rail kind of tied together here. And it's kind of the generation of some of that density there. This is kind of, and also the kind of material there. And just a quick little breakdown of how like those kind of geometries are kind of meshed in kind of Houdini, and his breakdown of his graphs for his master materials and his texture sets he created in Designer. Peter really had a lot of environment art knowledge coming in, so this helped him out a lot for building. Like this is a tool he created to build the grass plumps from a set of atlases that he kind of built quickly in Photoshop, and I think it just came out great. Another really great piece I think is this one right here, which was very like Monster Hunter inspired. Yeah, this one was really cool. That Gazelle Dale kind of play it one more time so we can kind of get the bit rate on that. And this one I thought was really, really stellar piece from like the spring term. And she kind of built this piece, but it's also kind of the procedural side here was this tool that lets you generate kind of cliffs, where the way an artist was supposed to use this was based upon some kind of reference or some kind of topographical. They kind of trace out an area, and this is in a height field. It would kind of generate these cliffs and generate these meshes that talk to these materials and engine for building out this case, and the rest of it's just a lot of traditional environment art set dressing. So what we really want and gear you towards is building useful tools or learning how to build useful tools, but also being able to build, just on top of that, build and showcase like a stellar art. Okay, I think I think we're pretty square on portfolio examples.
Um,
Yeah.
I do want to bring up something that I
Go for it.
assume there will be like a few folks at least who are tuned in today who might want to ask. Um, do you think AI will replace certain aspects of tech art, or will it make the role actually maybe even more important than what it already is?
I think it's gonna be way more important because, again, especially if you're doing a lot of procedural tech art, kind of like it's a match made in heaven for AI because again, I think a lot of people have a bad taste in their mouth just from using bad tools. Um, the really cool thing is, but it's just like it's another approach to build useful implementations for your artists and for the teams that you work on. Okay, and the cool thing about Houdini or Substance Design or any procedural toolkit is that it gives you an ability to create a lot of inputs and outputs. It gives you the ability to create a lot of what we call synthetic data. So you kind of these kind of things married together. And as I think slowly we're starting to actually see some real actual proper tools, like proper good good applications that utilize artificial intelligence. I would say like Cursor is a really great example on like kind of like the more coding kind of context in front. And I think some of the really new stuff in Houdini 21 with the example based and some of the Onyx inferences are very interesting. I think there's a lot of hubbub, about like or concern about AI replacing people. I'm here to tell you that's never going to happen. And I kind of mean that like very, very specifically. It's like there's a lot of reasons why that's not going to happen. Namely because um, if I have an option, let's say I have a staff of, let's say, 500 artists, and I could replace, let's say, 300 of them with some cool AI models. Wow, to push out some art. Um, Great, cool. I got the same output I had before with less bodies. Okay, my competitor kept his artist, brought in these new tools, and now their game looks 10 times better. Their game looks much great. Like the trend has always been to do more. And we're far in games from the limit. Like I'm not sure if you guys know this, but like games don't look real. They don't look like outside, okay? Or like if you look around this room. Now, in offline productions, like in VFX and movies, there's a lot of shots where really they can spend the time and the render resources to kind of get it, pretty close. But we have a pretty far way there. AI is probably going to help us, close that gap, and so there. I would ultimately the type of jobs that you probably don't want to take are the jobs that are probably going to be eliminated. So a lot of like the kind of grindy, kind of asset farmy type jobs, those are the ones that are most likely to cut talent. But like, there it's just math at the end of the day. Like and also a whole nother thing too, it's like scarcity is like is not like it's like like there's no such thing as post scarcity. You can't just with AI, even if you had perfect robots, like you can't automate away people because humans have hedonic adaptation. They're always going to want more. They're always going to want the next thing, the more competitive. Like it's if you actually look into like how many people, especially in games, have been lost their jobs due to AI, it's no one really. There's been some teams that maybe fire some engineers here and there just because they want to spend more money on engineers that are like data scientists in AI, but that's not what we're talking about. We're like and AI is like making your art and you're left on the side. I think it's a lot of hubbub about nothing. If you really want to dig into the statistics on this stuff, there's a really great survey that goes around, industry survey about approaching technologies. And like if you go through it and you look at the industries that are the most interested or like most thinking about cutting waste, it's usually the parts of art. And this survey is done across VFX, and it's done across games, it's done across television, and so on. And the least technical of those, games is very technical because we have to deliver a piece of software, right? Versus a shot or a render or a pretty image. Those like less technical fields are more like kind of flirtatious with it, whereas like we kind of know that like there's like there's so much that is involved in getting something to look good, to run reliably, that like you're just not going to get that out of a machine. And even if you could, why would you not want to just pair that up with someone who has that artistic? It basically, you have like another, you have another AI that's had like 20, 30, 40 years of training, and they can work together and generate the best art. I think it's just not something to I can't waste your energy on like dreading about. Okay. Sorry, you skipped my questions before. Oh, my bad. If you could answer, this would be great. What are the best practices on creating tools for artists to use? What are the best practices when it comes to optimization and engine making assets? Okay, I'm actually gonna put a pin in that one, Jason, just because that's a long answer. I think I might be best a little bit to address some of that during or right before our demo. Um, what project tool made you the happiest to deliver as a tech artist? I I really liked working on Poppy Playtime series because it's kids. I mean, it's like a really small cohort, and like I was like the super cool uncle. I would I'd be like my nieces and nephews like birthday party, and all the kids like, oh my gosh, because kids are crazy about that franchise. Also, I really loved like when we launched, because like we would have a lot of like hate, like crazy amounts of like hate. It's like from like 8-year-olds and 7-year-olds. It's cute. It's so I love it. Like and they're all like FNAF Friday Night at Freddy's fans. It's I would like love to I would just go through all, like, read all the negative the Steam reviews, and they're pretty funny. Like it's like it's just very wholesome in my heart. So that I always enjoyed launching titles on at that studio, and also that was a really cool studio just because of how fast our production cycles were. Okay. Um, is using code AI assist considered cheating, or is it just a new tool for increasing productivity? Have you noticed that AI tools are starting to be included in the artistic process in studios? Um, yeah, I mean, so like when again, this is kind of, I guess, a little bit of what I was talking about a little bit earlier with like when people say AI tools, like what comes to mind probably right away is like Midjourney or something like that. Which again, these are not tools. These are really like, these are kind of meant for people. Like a tool, definitionally a tool, usually you need to know something about, if you have a lathe. All right, not a random person can go use a lathe and run a lathe. You need to be a machinist, right? Like tools are kind of need to have some knowledge. A lot of the stuff that we see is kind of these techniques kind of work really well, especially like LLMs, if there's like a huge amount of data. Okay, so like the reason why some of these are so kind of open to the public in this way, it's just because it's really easy if a venture capitalist kind of can type in, oh, well, that's kind of neat, man. I'll invest in this, and also other people will use it, and it gets more data and it becomes better. But like with the types of AI tools we're kind of talking about that are useful for us in production are bespoke solutions to problems that we have. So usually it's something that is like, oh, like the example I brought up from the Borderlands team, where there's something specific to our game, our art style, or our pipeline, that this can maybe fit in here and be useful. Here's another example. I can just give you something. Um, let's say you in program. Let's say you are the great programmer, but let's say you do something kind of difficult. One thing that's kind of difficult is, let's say, interior room generation. Okay. Now, there's a reason why you don't rarely see games that have rooms on the inside, because actually uh, you can procedurally generate cities and all that, and that's not too crazy difficult. But room interiors is actually quite painful. There's a lot of shorthand ways if you don't have that many criteria, and you just, oh, it needs to have some rooms in there. But for it to actually make sense and move through it like you would a house or like an office building, and be entirely kind of procedural, that's actually kind of a hard programming context with a lot of edge cases and all kinds of things. Well, maybe you don't need to solve that problem. Maybe you need to make a fast version, just program as best you can, and maybe it creates good versions of this 50% of the time. But you just generate 1,000 of these and trim out the bad ones, and now you have, let's say, your beginning seed or silhouette, and now you have those good rooms, and you can train a model that now is just now always give you good room generation. So that's another use case. There's ways that you can kind of cut through you know and use this stuff for your own benefit. Um, I'm really interested in Tech Art Bootcamp. I recently noticed you won't be leading the class this time. Would you share how that change might affect the program? Will you still be involved in some of the sessions? So, 100%. All the course content is made by there. I don't. You guys are in good hands. Hisham is. I would trust Hisham. Uh, I have great trust in Hisham. Okay. Um, he's like my number one. He's my protege in a real sense, actually, because I trained him from time he was in school. And occasionally I'll be dropping in for guest lectures, or occasionally I'll be kind of jumping on these. And but so it's kind of a co-development thing there. But also it's the same thing. Like, you guys can reach out to me on the Discord. We have a Vertex Discord, and also on our Mighty Networks, and we can if you have any trouble in the class, or also you just want another um uh um another kind of thought about this, or a way to see this. Well, one thing I usually do a lot of times during my workday is just be in like a voice chat in like a Tech Art channel, and so just working, just kind of with my headphones in. So that's you can hop in if you have a problem, and we can always use that as like an office hours. It's very very informal in that context. Okay, I want to answer these questions, but I also want to have time. How are we doing on time, Yash? I don't want to make sure we have time for
We
demos.
I think we can answer like the remaining ones that are in there, and then we can like head for the demo.
Okay. I mean, something like Comfy UI, for example, and local models for process. Yeah, that's okay. That I think Comfy UI is a good example of actually a useful tool. N8N is a useful example of that. And other variations of the thing about really it's just stable diffusion, but with a lot of bells and whistles. But even then, I would say those don't even to me feel like Comfy UI is good, but it's not like I think Cursor was the first tool I used where I was like, this really does feel like an actual tool, because the suggestions there are just they kind of show up. It's based upon hotkeys. It kind of feels like when you use Maya or whatever, it's just you learn these hotkeys, and after you kind of learned a little bit, it's like it's like breathing or bicycling, whatever. Like, really, the relationship with let's say if you're parsing an LLM or whatever, needs to kind of feel that way a little bit. So, but they'll get there. Um, Also, it takes it takes time for these models to become general enough to kind of solve all those kind of use cases, and kind of because we don't want clippy. We don't want like something annoying that's not really useful to us. That's just getting in the way. Hello, William and Yash. Nice to meet you. You told us that the most important part of taking Vertex course is being proactive outside of lessons and homework. For sure. You said we should experiment and rack our brains to um, overcome the challenges that come as we learn. But how much can we really experiment? Sometimes the rabbit hole gets so deep we can't see the light anymore. Can you give us an example of how the weekly goals are set during the course? For sure. So we have like that let's say that 3 or 4 hours, but we also have like a deliverable at the end of the week, and usually it's something that you would do in the context of that that lesson. Let's say we maybe have intro to procedural modeling, right? So like for that example, we have like I think an example where we make a tool where you can have a spline generates like a cobblestone kind of bridge, and build something kind of like that. Now we make it a little bit open-ended so you can have a little bit of fun there, because we do want you to kind of have ask your own questions and kind of explore there. But like it is very guided in that structure. Like we are walking you through this in a kind of a structured way for a reason. um what is your view on the last year's layoffs? It seems a lot of experienced people are struggling finding jobs, or does it look more grim from the? I think it's just a COVID thing. Really, there was like a huge amount of over investment and in firms that uh like didn't weren't dependent upon lockdowns, right? Basically, so it wasn't just us. It's like a lot of the other tech sectors, Twitter and like other Silicon Valleys had the same kind of bust. So I don't think it's really related very much to. So a lot of people like to look at that and look at it's they're just not. It's just there was a lot. If you actually look at charts, this is kind of funny too. You can find these on like LinkedIn or Twitter of like the investment amount. It's like it was like triple X the normal investment cap went into games during like 2020 2021. So obviously that was going to like you crash out at some point. And yeah, what is your view? It's the specific areas of ML that are particular hot in games currently. Depends on the team. Okay, there's going to be a lot of big teams, a lot of big AAA teams that really aren't touching that content at all, are still, somewhat behind. A lot of this, we oftentimes in production we want something stable and mature. Now there are other teams that are chasing after that. Meta is, I work on Horizon Worlds and we use a lot of mixture of procedural art and like generative AI in a virtual reality context. Obviously we're kind of we're not really AAA because we're not traditionally a games company. We're like Silicon Valley company, although I guess we own the biggest VR platform. So like we're really pushing that because that's like something kind of like the Meta AI is kind of on the tin a little bit. But like for sure, especially like all your engineer friends are using things like Cursor, things like Copilot, So definitely 100%, especially on the programming side of things, engineering side, it's going to come up there all the time. One thing I'll say also about those things, because especially if you don't have a lot of coding knowledge and you kind of come in, I will say like some of these AI like code tools or whatever, they can be they can create training scars. Okay, they can be like bad in certain contexts. So what I always say and how I like to use them, I think what is the way you should use them is treat them. I'll use an artist metaphor like kit bashing. So a lot of times how I like to do a scene, let's say I decide to do an environment scene or something like that, I will find a cool reference. Oh wow, super cool, awesome reference. I will just do a first pass. I'll just get a bunch of kit bash stuff. Like I don't really care about the performance of the scene. Okay, I don't care about like these are maybe not meant for games, not games ready. I'll just do a quick bash of just tossing everything in there just to see if I can get the vibe, get the mood, get the composition that I want. And I can step back and I start asking certain questions. Okay, interesting. What what is this missing? What I don't need to miss, and then I'll kind of break that scene down into a block out and kind of build everything from scratch and see where I can cut corners and not. I think that's the same kind of context where you really want to use things like a lot of the generative AI, like you ChatGPT. How do you be a programmer? Is like when you're trying to get that first working prototype, and like you want to get that in front of someone right away. You want to be able to iterate on that as soon as possible. At some point, you're going to get to a point where you're just going to need to refactor that whole thing, kind of just be like the turn the AI buddy off, and just like kind of work through it and fully understand what's going on. Because the level of complexity there, like they have improved quite a bit in this last year at being able to do like useful production code. But even then, like the level of complexity that the systems can have, especially across a pipeline, across multiple tools, like tying together, which is the type of things that tech artists are usually kind of doing, is just more than what they can help you for. Also, they a lot of times they'll output code that's a little not bad, but it's just not written very human like, and it's not very easy to like maintain and kind of like follow up versus like something like if you wrote it yourself. So use it when it's helpful to you, but don't use it as a crutch. Okay, I think that's good. I think there's one I kind of skipped earlier. I think I want to come back to it so he doesn't think I'm
I
skipping
think
him.
you
No,
covered all of
Jason.
them.
Okay, yeah. So,
Okay.
what are the best practices on creating tools for artists to use and best practice when it comes to
Oh yeah.
optimization? Okay, we'll just skip the optimization question because that's a big too. I could go on for like an hour. But as far as artist tools, it needs to be artist friendly. It needs to be something, don't give them a billion sliders. Oftentimes the best thing to do is actually work with an artist. Okay. A lot of times artists are, they're scrappy people, environment artists. They see some cool thing on 80 levels, some cool thing on Twitter, like, hey, I saw this cool thing here. I kind of tried to make this like kind of material like this. And maybe they don't fully understand every node and what all it's doing, but they got kind of the vibe, and you can kind of see the way they're thinking about it from the way, maybe the way they set up their inputs and their outputs, and you can kind of build it with them. So always work with artists if you can. And I always try to say for any given thing, there needs to just be well named, impactful features. Instead, three settings, not 20. Okay. You don't need to. Ultimately, you probably don't need to control every single bell and whistle. Just the things that mean and matter to the artist. Okay. With that, let's go ahead and do a little bit of a demo.
Yep. Well, if everyone can just pop in the chat, if you guys can see the screen share, that would be great.
Yeah.
I think I can see a screen. Okay, yeah. If you see black, it's just, I take it that's just
It's
what.
like a blue, right? I'm just setting my
yeah.
timer to make sure we don't go super far over for this. We're going to do a little bit of, I think, material stuff, and then do a little bit of Houdini stuff. So we'll kind of take a look at Unreal. And I think this is when I'm introducing someone to kind of tech art, introducing someone into kind of really like things that are maybe a little bit more maybe like math oriented, whatever. I really love like materials as a showcase for this. Like shaders are a really great use case for this because it's all visual and we're not seeing numbers. We're really rarely working with numbers. We're working with colors. Okay, so what you're seeing right here is probably the most important image in computer graphics. This is a very humble texture coordinate image, but basically this one way or another basically gets made into everything actually, and this is all you kind of need as a tech artist to build whole worlds. And we're going to kind of use this as a starting point. So okay, I'm just going to hop in here like this. We crashed a little bit earlier. Okay, so first things first, this is the material editor. Now I think I might have to add like a small little addendum to y'all's course because I think 5.7 will have they're gonna redo this a little bit to be more like Blender or Maya. But it's kind of a big Uber shader where it has base colors and all these things. We're just gonna focus on just like an unlit shader because we kind of just want to see some variations. At the end of this, we'll kind of want to make something that would be useful for like a little effect or something like that. But we really just want to get an idea for what is this whole thing about using math to make things pretty, or using what is that even about? So we're going to start just by setting this to plain. We're going to set this to front. We're going to go unlit because we really just want to know the values here. And we want to know what is this crazy looking square in front of me, okay? So first things first, this is a texture coordinate. If you don't have that, you T-click. Actually, not that T-click. You can type for a texture coord. And this is it. What this is just a sample. Okay, so look at your UVs. Okay, so you lay out you might be used to laying out your model's UVs, and you're doing that in some grid space 0 to 1. What we're looking at here is a number line. Okay, we're just looking at two number lines, like an X and a Y. Okay, but using colors instead of numbers. Okay, and what helps, I think, a lot of times is for us to kind of break this apart. So we can do Control C, sorry, Shift C, and you get this thing called a mask, and it just lets you look at different channels. This is a vector 2. So we're just going to look at the R channel, which is going to be the same thing as U or X. And what we'll notice is there's a gradient, from 0 to 1. So here, what we kind of want to think about is black is 0, white is 1. Okay, and like this gradation is a value in between. Most of the time, and we're going to try to work as much as we can in the 0 to 1 or in unit length, like -1 to 1. Because that 1, it's easier to visualize the output just because it's hard to conceptualize what color is 3 or 4. It's but we can always kind of normalize that to 0 to 1. Additionally, there's certain like mathematical properties of like this number range, and also -1 to 1 when we get to like dot products of vectors or so on, that's useful. So we kind of stay here to kind of visualize things. Ultimately, let me show you the other one. So this one is the green channel, which is our y, and it's 0 goes to 1. Okay, now you might be asking yourself, well, it's kind of weird. Why isn't it starting above? Like when I was in grade school, we kind of wrote let's we kind of had it like this. And the thing is, it's just a convention. Direct Unreal's kind of based on DirectX, and just by convention they start up in the bottom corner. Different engines like Unity that are more based upon OpenGL and Vulkan will kind of be different from that, where they will kind of start in like the bottom corner right here. It doesn't matter. This is actually why, like in like your baking software, that sometimes they have like a flip green channel option. Okay, so I kind of we're just gonna play around with this math a little bit. So I'm gonna hit M. I'm gonna tops down and multiply. If I'm gonna multiply this guy, and I'm just gonna multiply him by 3. Okay. And we're just going to see what does that change. Now we notice that our gradient kind of changed a little bit, okay? And what's happened is that now what we had numbers. So we can always what we kind of want to do is build an intuition. Ultimately, what we kind of want to do here is just like when you're doing a lot of texturing, you like someone who does a lot of texturing in the Substance Painter maybe grows a really good intuition where they can see a roughness map and like, okay, I can tell just from seeing the roughness map what parts of this are rough or shiny or so on. We kind of want to have a similar concept, just even more low level than that, where it's just like math and like what's going on in the flow here. So this is what I'm going to do actually is grab my pen if it wants to behave. Yeah, it give me 1 second here. All right, there it goes. Okay. So this was before let's say when I right click this and start previewing. This was the so one thing to keep in mind, we're with the material, it's just a wrapper for a shader, right? This is all happening on the GPU. Okay, it's all happening on pixels. So really, unlike when you're kind of programming for games or wherever, where you're doing things very, very sequentially, kind of when we're doing this math, we're actually doing this math like a million times. Funnily enough, every single pixel. Let's say we're just gonna make it simple. So this is 1K by 1K. Okay, that's just about a million. Okay, pixels. So what was actually happening is right here, there's a number which is 0. Okay. Down here is a number that's 1. Okay. Right here is a number that's like 0.5. Over here is a number like 0.5. This one right here might be 0.2, and so on. And we're just doing this let's say this multiplication, multiplying each one of these numbers at the same time times 3. Okay. But just separately. They're all in their own parallel streams. Okay. That's kind of like what's happening here a little bit. So, but it's always easy for us to kind of work through this because we work from a gradient, so we can always kind of see that number line. Okay, it's a gradient, a linear gradient. It's just a number line. Those are like an art concept and a math concept kind of together. So we multiply it by 3. Let's just think about that for a second. Okay, if we had before let's go delete all these guys. If we had before 0 and 1, okay, well that would obviously, and we just multiply this by 3. Well, I mean, we're smart people. We know that that would just be 0, and 1 times 3, that would just be 3. Okay. So now this is a gradient in between, and you might even notice that like there's kind of like this harsh line right here, because what's happened is we're going from 0 basically to 1. This was like 0.333 multiplied by 3, a third. It's going to be 1. And all of this just goes up to 2 and to 3 and so on. When you get past 1, it's kind of it's just going to clip out. It's going to clip past 1, so we can't really visualize that. But there's some special math operations you maybe didn't learn in school that are useful, like what we call fractional division. That can help us take a look at that. So fractional division is this idea of throwing away the whole number. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start that preview right here. And it's interesting. So we had 0 to 1 then 1 to 2, but we decided just to toss away all our whole numbers, right? So like, uh, so we just ended up with 0 to 1, 0 to 1, 0 to 1, right? Because this would be like 1.1, 1.2, and so on as it walks through this gradient. And since we're just getting rid of the left side of that float, it's creating this gradient. That's interesting. Okay, because what that means now is that already we're getting to a space where maybe I can start to create patterns, shapes, get forms, which is what we really care about when we're trying to make things. I can multiply this by 6. One thing else I could do is like I could just round. Let me just try tossing around here. We all know what rounding does. If it's 0.5 or higher, we hop up to 1. If not, we go down to 0. So, I mean, what do we think is going to happen here? Does anyone want to gander a guess? We can have it be a little interactive. If someone wants to put their hands up, they can kind of tell me what they think would happen if I round this fractional division.
Or maybe just feel free to pop it in the chat. Either way is fine. Oh, zebra patch.
Stripes. Yes, that's great. So if I toss that in there, we just get stripes. Okay. So what we can think about for this multiply, okay, we can think about this multiply as something that tiles, okay, or controls scale, right? So we can control the number of bands in this context. So that's one thing we can think about. We can also think about adding. All right, so let's say I just want to add, okay? Let's say I add like 2 to this. And just so there was a little bit of change, but black and white is maybe hard to see. What we'll do is do time. We'll just get a time sample that we can kind of see this over time. Now, what I'll do is I'll just have a little multiply here. It's just because it gets like, I think they're all seconds, so it's going to go really fast right away. So I'll just like give this a small multiplier here to just kind of control it. And we'll put this in the add, and we can kind of, maybe that's too slow. Let's see. Actually, I think what might be better here is to do it on the other side of this equation right here. Oh, here comes the fun part. Oh, I think, I understand. That's because I think when we're fracking past this, we're actually just going too fast. So let's just do this right here. This is one of the great things about the great things about something like the material editor is that it gives you a lot of flexibility with nodes that you can kind of just play around, especially if you kind of hit up oh, you know what? Yeah, I don't think the viewport's set to real time. Okay. I was about to lose my mind. I was like, okay. It's like this math is totally right. So right here we have an offset, okay? So I'll just set it back here where we maybe we're setting this to a little bit a lower scale. And this is just this is panning it, okay? And why is that the case? Well, it's the case because remember, this was just a gradient. If I were to start previewing this right here, and let's say instead of adding this, we just added something that was under 1, let's say something like 0.2, you would notice like our whole thing's kind of shifted a little bit. Let's say go the other direction, -2. We've kind of shifted that whole gradient. And right now we're going into negative space a little bit, and that's going to clip out to black. So if I just copy this this frac node here, so we can kind of help visualize this for ourselves. Actually, another cool way to do this too is to use an absolute value as another useful way to kind of visualize. So what that means is that there were values here, because absolute value, what it does, just it makes everything positive valued. So what this means that sometimes you have to kind of know these little tricks a little bit, so that you can kind of know if there's useful data here. Is this really 0, or is there negative numbers here? Well, they're negative numbers, and I know that because when I go to absolute value them, they show up as like a 0 to 1 gradient. And also, here's another cool thing. Absolute value, what you might notice now, it's kind of like a mirror. Absolute value, you can think of this as essentially like a mirroring function. Okay. So that's like kind of an artist kind of tool case that, symmetry, it can do symmetry for you. Okay. So we have that. Let's say we have, this little offset. We might want to make this just a little bit more interesting. And what I want to show you now is something called domain warping or domain distortion. And we can do this really simply with something called noise, which is just a really cool texture made from you guys are probably familiar with it a little bit if you're familiar with Substance Painter. But it's made from math, and we actually will go through writing our own noise functions from scratch and all those type of things in our course. But to show you what we can kind of do with these type of things, first of all, um, let's see, this is fine. This one that's built into the engine right here. I can actually have that be maybe be like my input here for. Let's just see what that does. Right off the bat, it just seems to do a whole lot of like weirdness, right? So I'm gonna do that, and this is super crazy warping, right? So that's cool, but right away this might just be a little bit strong. So I want to kind of blend it off. And there's another cool math thing called a LIRP, linear interpolation, which is that's just a mixing, that's just blending, okay? And L click can give you that. And what I'm just going to do is go from my original gradient to this one. I'm just going to use this alpha as like my blend phase, okay? And I can just kind of bring this kind of off a little bit. And that is kind of that's a lot cooler looking. That might work for me a lot better. And maybe we can come back to our ad, and we'll maybe try to make something that looks like moving kind of ripples or waterfalls or something like that. And already that's a little bit overpowered, so we're gonna bring that back a little bit. Right, and it's all kinds of getting trippy already. And that's just right now. We've only been looking at like one axis here, right? We could have been looking at both axes, at the same time because this math is happening across either. Or maybe we want to be even cooler. We could do something like polar coordinates, right? We could just convert this whole thing to polar coordinates, right? That make it spin around. So they have some built-in stuff for this. I think it's vector to radial value is what they call it here. And this is a whole great thing. We could go into all the math that's involved there. It's very fun stuff, but we could maybe do that and just see what that gets us. Let's do this. Let's do that. Kind of where you kind of apply this is kind of sometimes critical. I think we'll play around with applying it at the very beginning. Which what this kind of does to give you an idea of what it does. Let's say we'll just take our original gradient in here and I'll pull this over here. It also might just need an offset. I'll start previewing this. So it's kind of giving us this right here. So it does kind of prefer an offset, meaning that instead of being 0 to 1, that we start at 0 here in the center and we go out like so. So to do an offset, again, what's offset? Adding or subtracting, right? Which is the same thing. So subtracting is just adding by negatives, right? So if I do this guy and I subtract by 0.5, I can go ahead and start previewing that. And this is 0 right here. This is 1 positive space. This is all 1 positive space. This is kind of like the different coordinate context. And you can even like if you want to test this even more so, you could do like an absolute value to kind of see prove that like say in this black space that there actually are numbers and so on. The same kind of tricks we were kind of talking about earlier. Anyhow, I'm just going to pass that in here and we'll kind of see what we get on the other side. On this side we get something that looks kind of like this, kind of cool, interesting looking, right? So I'm going to drop down that mask again so we can kind of just look at each one of these channels individually, because I think it's really important to kind of understand kind of what's going on here and why this is going to do the thing it's going to do in a second. So let's say we look now at our red channel, which was our U or our X. And what is this? This is now a gradient that is spinning around. All right, okay, kind of cool. And we have another gradient that's kind of coming out. Okay, and this is a polar coordinate. So we had something that the big fancy math word is what's called Cartesian coordinates, right? The normal XY graphs, and now we've converted it into something that is this polar coordinates, which this is the type of this might think like sonar, a sonar thing on a submarine. Okay, and we can use this. So I could plug this into the same set of nodes that we kind of had before, and we kind of see how this kind of behaves. Let's go all the way down here to the round. Maybe all right, trippy, right? And that was kind of really easy, right? We didn't really have to change that much of our setup, but because the same sets of offsets and distortions that were happening on this space kind of works here. Okay, I think this is pretty great. What we might do, I mean, we could always play around with color. One thing I'll show you also is that this is right here. We're masking this on red channel, but this is also a coordinate system, right? This is actually we've warped a space, so we could actually have a texture sample from this, which is actually kind of crazy. Now with this, it might just end up being kind of weird looking, but I'll just make a copy of this and find another texture. We want something maybe kind of colorful, maybe like something kind of rainbow-ish. You might just use one of these UV color grids. Those are used, those are fairly colorful. Actually, that one's kind of funny, but it's in a circle, so it's probably going to be weirder than like you might expect. But let's say we do something like this, and we pass in this guy, and you start previewing. We're going to see we're already kind of in psychedelic land already. Now, what you might notice, there's a very subtle little line artifact here, and we can kind of solve that. This is like not super like a mathy thing. It's just like kind of a thing about how like texture samples work. Necessarily, remember we had that big swoosh that went 180. At the end of that, where it's like tiling, it's a big what we call discontinuity. When it's filtering this, it's what's called MIPS. If you guys are we familiar with what MIPS are, guys? If you know what LEDs are, it's kind of the same thing for a texture. Your texture stores like lower resolution versions of it, and it just gets a little confused about exactly what pixel value if there's big jumps like that. And we're just going to use a MIP mode in here called derivative, because that's what fancy math term from calculus. A derivative just is like the rate of change. It just tells you what the rate of change is. So we're just going to give it the rate of change. We don't actually have to do any math for this. There are like hardware specific derivatives that are computed by your GPU called screen space derivatives that we can just call and reference. So we're going to do that. DDY and DDX. And we can just pass in that off of the original coordinate system. If we plug that in here, it'll just fix this little buggy. Okay. All right, now you don't really have that issue anymore. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit save on that one. And oh, we have to plug it into our emissive if we want to see it like show up in the world. All right, cool beans. And well, this is going to be kind of like a a cooking show a little bit, where I have another similar example of this. I'll kind of just pull out to kind of show you guys a little bit, since I don't think we'll have time to go over this before we want to hop into Houdini. Is a very similar, where this one's very, very trippy. This one's more kind of a similar idea. I think I maybe made this one for like the last open day demo. And this one's kind of more of an animation where one cool thing about actually I like about the material instances is that I can figure out where the viewport is in this. this instance, is that they update like right away. Oh, here it is. So a lot of times I like to showcase a material, oops, in the instance instead, just because I can change the settings right away. I don't have to wait on it to update. Also, this is not set to real time, so we'll do that. And also, just so we don't have any weird lighting getting away of our animation, I'll set this to unlit. And we have kind of a 2D wave animation. It's kind of made the same way, where I have this ability to kind of distort it. I kind of turn that distortion up or down on those waves. I can change the angle at the beach it's hitting the beach. I can play around with some of these colors and darkens there, but it's all the same kind of techniques at the end of the day. And if we hop in there, we'll just give a little quick glance to this, because you might be a little curious about what's all going on there. But this one's a little bit more involved, but it's ultimately the same kind of thing. It's just repeated over and over again for like getting this artistic look. In particular, one thing that's kind of neat is this use of a dot product. So when we have an angle here, cosine, sine, that gives us a radian value here that we dot product against our initial like UVs, which is again your UV that we were distorting is actually like a space coordinates. That's kind of how we're getting the rotation. This kind of will give you, which if you don't know what a dot product is like this cool tool that if you have pointy arrows, it tells you how related they are to each other. So if you have a vector and they're all pointing the same way, it's going to give you 1. Otherwise, it's going to give you 0 if they're orthogonal or perpendicular, and -1 if they're the opposite direction. This is a really great one that I think it's actually one of the ones that we kind of cover in the class kind of early on, so in the first couple of weeks. So something kind of useful to look forward to. But another cool use case for these same methods is terrains. And so here in Houdini, you can do a lot of really cool things in Houdini, but you can also do a lot of these same operations, these distortions, these working with noises to create things. Here we have kind of a cool little setup here. And this one's pre-made. We'll kind of walk to back and forth to this one, but we'll just work from scratch. Houdini is really cool. Basically, how it works on is I'm going to use these concepts called ops. I'll say like sops or tops or cops. And that's a little bit what we call Houdini speak. Well, nodes here are called operators. And right now we're in what's called the geometry context. And that means we're just doing things with geometry. And we call that SOP, surface operators. Now, it's funny, we call it geometry context because everything we're doing right now is actually in a volume context. This is what's called height fields. So Houdini is really good at creating geometry, or rather terrains, because it actually calculates its terrains as like a infinitely tiny thin slice of a volume. If I middle mouse click on this guy, it tells me data about it, and it's just a 500 by 500 by 1 volume. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a height field noise. Okay. And that's another SOP I can get out here. You hit tab to drop little nodes here. And what this is it's just like that noise that we kind of had before, but now we're applying it to height. And they have built in here a huge selection of noises. We'll kind of go through all this, and we'll kind of during our course, like you have a huge amount of exposure to noises. You'll kind of learn to write the same kind of fractal Brownian motion, the FBM, yourself, and get a deep understanding for this. But we'll start with something like a whirly noise, which is kind of a cells noise, and I'll kind of back off on the roughness. I want something kind of just a base shape. I want to start with my base shapes. Just get kind of a basey, mountainy kind of shape. You can play around with like so here they call it element size. That's under the hood. This is like a multiplication. It's a scale. Okay. Cool beans. And what I can do maybe now is I can do another noise just on top of that. But now what I want to do is I want to be more micro. And so I want to have something that's going to be a little bit more rough. I might do Perlin, sparse convolution, simplex. They're all about the same and pretty good for these things. So we're going to just bring this in super tiny. And I want my amplitude to be way, 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 way tiny. So I want to just be kind of a very little bit of things that's just kind of detail on top. Okay. Let's see. Let's increase that to maybe kind of like that. Another cool thing you can do is you can do distort. So that same kind of thing that we were kind of doing, where we're distorting a domain, we can kind of do that here too, where we have distort by noise. And the idea here is just like that kind of setup that we had, where we had a materials where we had like a noise texture and was going into the UVs and it was distorting it. That's kind of like wrapped in here. One thing you might notice, each one of these nodes has a little lock symbol on it. Okay, and that's called an HDA. Okay, you can dive in here if you're ever curious how some of these nodes work. You can always unlock them and just dive in and learn how each one of them works. Some of them are made of code. This is a really cool scripting like language, like almost like a shader language called Vex, that you'll get real familiar with in our course. And this is also a VOP, where so everything you can do in Vex, you can actually do in this little, almost like a material graph here. I don't know. I've never understood it. Like why people who work at like Tool, like Unreal or Houdini, their nodes are always so disorganized. I'm like kind of OCD when I kind of build my things. So I don't know, it's always kind of bothers me. But here we're distorting that domain underneath there with like kind of one of these built-in noises, and we have curl and we have simplex, and already we're getting something that's kind of interesting. I was kind of liking what we had with the curl noise. The simplex is okay, but I kind of like this this kind of, it's getting us like kind of those mountain shapes pretty quickly, and that's already pretty interesting. There's a lot of things I could do. I could mask. I could, let's say, mask by feature. So what's that? That's a really cool little thing they have here, where I could choose a bunch of different options. I could choose by slope. So this might be like the sloping angle. Maybe I just want to get the sides of here. I want to have like a different type of look on these edges, or so on. And I can maybe have a mask right here. And basically what this mask is just another volume. It's just another, thing here. And I can use this. Each one of these little pins has um has an input for a mask. And what the masks there are will kind of exclude this operation on these height field nodes to just that masked area. So I think what might be a fun one to do, let me kind of look at, see if I get any fun ideas from what we have over here. Oh, you know what could be cool? We might do flow fields. Yeah. If flow fields will let me do.
As you quickly pull that up, just again want to pop and mention, guys, if you have any questions, now will be the time, because I think we might go slightly over
Mhm.
the time we have, but I appreciate you guys being here and interacting with us. And I hope you guys are enjoying the demo.
So you can also have access to blurs, sharpens, all those types of things. Um, I think for the purpose of time, right here, I can use this mask right here to maybe blur this generation. We kind of did a really quick sim, pseudo sim to kind of get us some interesting things going on right there. I'm gonna go ahead and clear these masks. And another really cool thing you can do is you can then just do solvers. So they have these really great kind of built-in kind of solvers. I'm just go ahead and rip this guy because I have some decent settings on this guy I kind of am vibing with. And basically the idea with this is that built into this is kind of like these, if I were to, it's basically a particle simulation, a huge particle simulation, where it's they've kind of thoughtful people at Side Effects have kind of built for you, where you don't have to like be fully be super crazy about this. It's going to kind of try to calculate hydro erosion. It's going to try to calculate like the type of wear you get from rain and precipitation on your train over like thousands of years, and you have like abilities to kind of be able to control that. So first thing I have to do is like unfreeze this node, and I'll go to my visualization stage here, and I think I might just set this back to kind of this default setup here. Now what it's doing right now is I have it freeze at frame 20. So like what it's trying to do right now is think ahead 20 frames and just do that calculation, because you usually only need like 20, 16 or so frames to kind of get what you need. So here it decided to do some interesting things. And I think we'll need to compute this range. And you see it's kind of already doing some interesting things right there. What I like to do is, what you'll notice is that you'll create a bunch of other masks, like one for water. But I think it's fun to kind of see it happen, just so you can get an idea for how this kind of works in vibes. I'm gonna set my frame range here to 20 so we can kind of see this happen kind of live. And so, right, so that's like kind of the simulation. You kind of see erosion kind of building down here. And this is just like basically the default settings on the node. You can really dig into these and get really, really deep. We'll kind of walk down this other stream that's kind of prepared here to kind of give you an idea of other things that you can kind of do. Kind of similarly, I did like the same type of whirling noise, but right away, I want to bring in geometry. This is like just a test geometry, just ahead. The idea for this is like maybe this is more of a fantasy type of game, whereas maybe like a giant's, monster or some dragon that's kind of become part of the landscape over time. This type of thing is a common thing in games. So I can just project that into the height field, and then I can also project a mask. That way I can kind of blur that area. I'm going to kind of invert that area so I can kind of do like a different type of blur here. I'm going to then do another layer of just like sparse noise that we're going to kind of blend on top. We're going to do some distortions. This is just something to kind of move this, move our offset up. And then, we do a erosion, and we kind of get that some of this erosion is already kind of looking kind of good and interesting. And from this point, we can kind of just, let's say if we're happy with this, we can export this to our game engine, either as a height field to, create a landscape, or we can even convert this into geometry, right? So we can convert a height field to convert this into just like a mesh, right? Where it, I'll turn this on to smooth wireframe, and you can see, it's triangles and so on. And you can do any kind of operations you might be interested in doing in geometry. We can even bring those point colors over a little bit. Yeah, so I think that will kind of conclude like, some of the stuff that we're doing here. Okay. Let me.
I think we have a few questions coming in.
Yes, awesome. I think we'll cover up the last of these Q&As before we head out. Okay. Did you guys like that? Was that like interesting? Was that helpful? That's what I always want to get a feel for the room. Was that like give you guys a better idea of maybe some of the types of content or types of stuff that we'll kind of be looking at, and maybe put color to some of those things I was talking about earlier about math is a lot funner when it's making things that are pretty. It was just amazing, super cool, great demo. Okie dokie. Maybe off topic, but I think tech artists will be important in any case.
Oh, if you
Yeah,
scroll
okay,
up, actually. Yeah.
let's see. Let's get back up to. Okay. William, this all looks amazing, really inspiring stuff. I was wondering, will these topics be part of the bootcamp program, or is this the main focus going to be procedural modeling? So we kind of teach the way I teach this course, and have create the content, and have geared and synced with Hisham on a lot, is we're teaching like a data-driven kind of algorithmic design. Okay, so like everything I kind of covered here, these were actually like seeing files from some different weeks. I think from week 8 and week 10. We cover we spend like the first half or so, or first half to quarter, half to third or so, of like kind of giving you like kind of these fundamental concepts that you'll see everywhere, like SDFs, which is sign distance functions, noises, different types of mathematics concepts like complex numbers, or handling rotations, dot products, and how those are used across various different software, across something like materials in Unreal, Niagara particles, something like in Houdini, maybe like even Vex and Houdini, OpenCL nodes in COBS, which is like a texturing thing, or shader toy, writing a little shader. So we want it to be very agnostic in that context. So we're showing you things, like Veroni diagrams, a lot of these concepts that we kind of build up, which are a kind of both these sometimes a little bit mathematical concepts, other times are just like these graphical concepts. If you're around computer graphics, you probably have seen whirly noise or probably seen pearly noise. Uh, kind of understand what's kind of happening behind the hood there a little bit, and seeing like, well, can you use these techniques in another context that you wouldn't think otherwise? Can I do this in with geometry, with points or something like that? And then what we'll do, and also we're going to start transitioning into like software specific things. We'll get intro to Houdini, intro into designer, and then we'll get into like a focus. So like we have a section of it 4 weeks, which is a effects focus. And that space will kind of get really deep into Niagara. We'll get really deep into more deep than we are already into shaders, to kind of showcase a bunch of effects oriented things you can do with shaders. We showcase a lot of DOPS, which is like dynamic operators in Houdini. So like simulations for cloth, for rigid body destructions, for fluid simulations, for pyro explosions, pyro. And then we get into an environment art focus, where we spend a lot of time building big worlds, beautiful, big procedural worlds. There's just some of this content from some of the Heightfield stuff is based. So in that context, we're spending a lot of time, making typable textures, building like terrains, building HDAs that we can use in Houdini Engine that can drive things and do interesting things in that context. A lot of this focuses on organic environment art, uh, rocks, trees, twigs, things like that is kind of the pleasure for those 4 weeks. And then we're going to be able to cap it off with your capstone space, where you guys will work for 4 weeks on that capstone space, and you'll come back and we'll be doing just art review and HDA review and going through your code, but also be doing like other types of demos during like our lab time. Usually it's very career oriented. So like we'll do portfolio reviews. We'll do we'll show you a breakdown of how to assess a job description, and see if this is what you need. How to get rid of the parts that don't matter, and say, okay, apply this. How to where to go online to find good help, soft skills, things like that. But also have some lectures are just on like basic like kind of rendering composition as we get closer to like that final cutoff date for our capstone. And then then we kind of get to the end, and you guys hopefully have a really great stellar portfolio piece, and you're out the door ready to start your career in tech art. I'd like to ask William, I think we have some time for a couple more questions. We're gonna dip. Thank you for your efforts. The demo is really interesting. I'd like to ask William, since he works at Meta, if he thinks VR AR will really take hold in the gaming industry, or will they remain something more tied to the world of metaverse or mixed reality? The thing is, I think there's maybe I don't know. That's a really kind of outside the scope of that's really a design thing. I think that there's a hardware situation where like the hardware has to get good enough that and well established enough that enough people have it, and it's super cool. I think VR and AR will probably just mix together, and like people won't know the difference. Like at Connect, we actually demoed like our new like glasses, the Meta Ray-Bans, that have like a screen built into it, and so it's kind of like you see in a sci-fi, but stuff like that will become more common. Contacts that you can kind of see on, and like the difference between AR and VR will kind of like go away. But really, I think the harder thing is that we've been doing like the traditional you're let's say like a first person shooter, you're like the stick move around. We've been making fun. We've been building game mechanics and finding fun there for a long time. It's going to take us a while to be able to build like most people, I think, who've played enough games will probably have an intuition for maybe what some of the right calls are right away. But when it comes to VR, there's so much that kind of has to be rebuilt from the ground up design wise. I think so much more of that's like a design actually challenge than it is a technical one. I think the technical problems are cool and interesting, but very solvable. The design problems, I think, are way more of the holdback. Also, maybe people don't want to be doing a full body workout every time they play. Uh, Maybe it's off topic, but I think tech art will be important. Yeah, I mean for sure. I mean, you got to make it run. Got to be performant. Okay, I think we have the last question. PCG sounds like it's the future indeed. Been dabbling around with Substance Designer, some Unreal blueprints, and shaders myself, but it's a bit overwhelmed with all the different coding languages used. How much basic coding will there be? Okay, there's actually going to be quite a bit. So I think it's like a thing where a lot of tech artists, especially juniors, will like do this thing where I'm afraid of code. Like, I don't. It's scary numbers and symbols. It's like that terminal's all black and it's the words are moving. Is this like the Matrix, bro? Um, Really, the goal that we're kind of trying to do, and like especially in the first 4 weeks or so of the course, is to give you a lot of constant continual exposure. So I'll show you something like, for example, that ocean example one. We actually do that class where we build that in nodes and then we kind of rebuild it in Shader Toy and GLSLS, which is a open GL shading language. It's and Houdini, sorry, in Unreal, there's something called custom nodes that you write HLSLS. They're the same language. They're just one's for DirectX, one's for OpenGL. They're basically it's called shader languages. Funny enough, another language that we're going to be writing a lot is something called Vex, which is basically like more or less it's meant to be like a shader language, except it runs on the CPU, but still parallel, just multi-threaded. So a lot of like shader scripting kind of stuff is what we'll probably spending most of our like context. And the reason why I like to use that is because it's hard enough getting your mind, onto like all these different kind of concepts, which there really aren't that many. I can actually fit them on one slide. I have. It's just how you manipulate and manage them. I find it's really great to do that in the context where it's very visual, and shader languages give you that benefit because just like the material editor was very visual, it's the same concept. There's other really useful languages to kind of get under your belt as a tech artist. Like Python's a big one, especially for pipeline stuff. But like it tends towards way more like non-visual kind of examples. But one thing I'll say why the squeeze is worth the juice is worth the squeeze is that if you're interested in maybe any of those like kind of custom, like your own custom trained machine learning model, whatever, a lot of that is Python oriented because the frameworks and so on, like for PyTorch and so on that people are using is kind of Python oriented. So knowing that, I mean, I took way too long to like really get deep into Python, but we kind of won't be covering that too much in this course. We're really just going to be sticking mainly to GLSL, a couple examples of HLSL, but you can think it's the same, and a lot of Vex and Houdini. So it's like really got scripting, or like you can think of like shader scripting, kind of programming. But anything that I show, I always want to show it in Node, show you in some easy, fun visual context, maybe in multiple software like Unreal, and maybe even show you that same kind of concept in Niagara and also materials, and maybe show you the same concept in like nodes in Houdini, but then scripting in Houdini, then in here. So the idea is that you start to see that it's all just the same thing, and like one's visual, one's made of letters, and okay. I think that's good. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to come to our open day.
I just want to mention just the last few things before we wrap up. I do believe someone had previously asked, just backtracking for like 2 seconds, about how structured are things, because sometimes you can get down a rabbit hole and it's like really
Yeah, I think
hard to
we
see.
answered that when that question
Yeah,
was.
I
Yeah.
just wanted to add to that, saying that as a student myself, as an ex-student or as an alumni myself, I can relate to that. To which I will say that for every, since you were asking every week, how does it go? Every week you are given like a certain end goal that you're supposed to work towards, and there are like certain guidelines that you can use as let's just say handrails, so so you have one, the freedom to explore and experiment as much as you want, while at the same time maintaining this balance of not getting so lost in experimenting that you don't finish what you started out. So yeah, there is structure and support available in that context. Next thing I do want to mention is thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I'm just going to pop a quick link in the chat. Um, oh, someone says, do you keep track how big the percentage is of people landing tech art jobs after your course? Yes, we do. However, I would um suggest sending us an email if you want those sorts of details, because I think it's more of our backend team who keeps track of
Yeah, JM
that.
definitely.
Yeah.
Like 100%. So like I'll get like one thing I think this might be a good thing to close on. Like our metric that, we measure the instructors here on is job placement. That's really like this is a vocational school. We want you guys to get jobs. That's really the so like, my bosses like Ryan and John Mark, I'm finishing up a cohort, they're coming back to me and say, okay, we're looking at these numbers and if we're always saying how many of these people got offers versus not offers. That's what we use as our compass to kind of say we need to change something in the course, work on the content, maybe add extra days, more resources for the students. So that is like our really kind of our number one priority. And what I'd say, if you're really curious and like, I don't have that offhand just because I make the course content, but I know JM loves doing one-on-ones with students, and he can break down you know all those kind of numbers for you in explicit detail if you send them an email.
Yeah. Just doubling down on that. If you guys just send us an email, I believe at support@vertexschool.com, that would be fantastic. I'm just popping a link in the chat real quick, in case any of you guys want to check out more details about this boot camp. I also want to mention that we are doing an offer of, like, we are giving 30% off to anyone who submits an application and enrolls into the course by 11:59 p.m. Pacific time of 24th of October. So make sure you check out the link, see if it is for you. If you have any questions, email us. I also want to quickly mention the enrollment process is super simple. So you basically go onto the link that I've just posted in the chat. You click on become that there's a button called apply now. If you click on that, there's just a basic form that you fill out, and then you just talk to our student admissions officer. And it's not like a super serious interview, it's just more to understand what goals are you chasing, and how does the course align to you, and how can we make sure that you get the best possible experience and that you land a job after this course. And from there we just help you on board, like enroll into the course. And once again, thank you everyone so much for joining us. Harvey, thank you for the amazing demo and for your time. And this recording will be shared with everyone over email. So thanks for joining, everyone, guys. I hope you had a good time. And I hope to see all of you in the next cohort for the course.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, guys.